Greetings, everybody. Chris Hislop from the Montana World Affairs Council. Welcome to Global Perspectives on Security. This is our international affairs webcast that delves deeper into the issues of the day, going beyond the headlines to understand more about what is going on in the world, particularly regarding security matters. I'm joined by the co-director of the Lobo Institute, Mick Mulroy, who has been our guest many times over the past few months. We started out with all the best intentions of covering the world, but then sometime in January, as things hotted up around Ukraine, we focused exclusively on that, rightly so. It is the absolute geopolitical and military issue of the day. And so we're going to keep on that. For those of you who've not met Mick, he is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, a retired CIA paramilitary operations officer, and United States Marine. He's a national security analyst and co-founder of the Lobo Institute and a board member at the Plato Institute in Athens, Greece. Mick is coming to us from Whitefish, Montana. Mick, how are you doing?
Great, Chris. Great to be with you.
Well, Mick, I can't help, it's not exactly deja vu, but it is every time that we speak, it seems like we're entering a new phase, or there's some step that has been taken on the ground that is dramatically changing the conversation, dramatically changing the way things are happening and how the dynamic is unfolding in and around Ukraine. Now, Mick has recently issued some other media pieces looking at the question now on everybody's minds is, what had once thought to be maybe a quick conflict is now dragging out, and concerns of this turning into a much longer war. I mean, if we look back, Mick, at Syria in the early days, maybe optimistically thinking, maybe this thing is just going to be a dust up and we're going to, have things sorted out in a few months. 9 years later, it's still going on. So, Mick, what can you tell us and our viewers here about the perspectives of this becoming a long war and the possibility of where can we short circuit that so it doesn't become so?
So, Chris, that is the big concern. I mean, at first we thought Russia was going to invade and occupy in relative short order, and then most of the effort would be on developing insurgency by the Ukrainians against the Russians staying in their country, and that would be essentially the long war. But now the actual invasion is turned into the long war, and that's going to be very destructive. We've already seen that the Russians failed in what we're calling the first phase, the effort to take the capital city of Kyiv. They've now moved to the Donbass, trying to gain terrain. That's not working very well. The Ukrainians have actually pushed and recovered all the areas around Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine. And that's a conventional fight, which most people did not really expect the Ukrainians to be ready to fight. And so it looks like this is, if the Russians are willing, and they can obviously call up more conscripts, they can send more people into the fray, so to speak. This looks like it could be the beginning of a frozen conflict, but one that's very destruction, especially since the Russians seem to have no qualms with attacking the civilian population as a means to terrorize them and cause issues throughout Europe. So the biggest concern now is, if that's the case, the chance of a conflict between Russia and NATO, particularly the United States, then goes up, because we are supplying the Ukrainians with so much advanced weapon systems that it could actually turn the tide against Russia. And we could see more of these circumstances where Russia is pushed all the way back to the border, like we saw this weekend.
Given the prospects of a longer conflict, what are some elements on the horizon that might short circuit that? Are there any hopes that maybe this does not become a longer conflict, be that via the military or diplomatic means? What are the chances?
So militarily, Chris, I think we're doing what we need to do, and that is to try to get the Ukrainians past just being able to defend their territory and into the realm of being a very capable maneuver, warfare, military, combined arms, which when you hear that term, that means air, indirect fire like artillery, ground like infantry, all together. So that's what they mean by combined arms. When you hear that, it's taking all the parts of your military and using them to one objective. So if we can get the Ukrainians up to that level, then they could actually gain ground and push Russia back into Russia, maybe even gain ground that they didn't have prior to the invasion. Now, the danger is then, or should we say, can President Putin afford to lose? Like, what will he do if it just becomes so obvious that he is going to lose the ground war in Russia? And that's a dangerous scenario, but it's one that we're going to have to risk, because we're certainly not going to not support the Ukrainians in their fight against the Russians. Diplomatically, that's also an issue, because we have, I think I've seen the latest in some parts of the world, grain prices have gone up 40%. Obviously, oil and energy prices have gone up. There's all sorts of sanctions that are depreciating the world's economy. Can we keep the entire coalition together the longer this goes on? I think the answer is yes, but it's certainly going to be more and more challenged. And it's important for everybody to know is NATO is, everybody gets a vote. There's 30 countries in NATO. So you have to keep everybody on board to do a lot of the things that we need done, including, as we're seeing right now, adding additional members like Finland and Sweden. So that's a challenge diplomatically. The longer this goes on, the more impact this has on our alliance and their economies.
So, Mick, as the two parties kind of come into a more protracted conflict, how does that change military strategy and what might be the ultimate goal of either of the militaries?
So the strategy I think we have in place, and that is we are introducing more advanced weapon systems that makes them more lethal. At the same time, we're pulling out the Ukrainians that we can to teach them on even more advanced systems. So they could end up with our helicopters, our fighter bomber aircraft, our air and missile defense, the THAAD and the Patriot, et cetera. And so that they keep going up to NATO standard, like full NATO standard. But this is where diplomacy and military strategy need to be intersected. We have to come up with, and this is probably an even harder task, a out for President Putin, so that he feels that he can, claim some sort of victory. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just, some war fought on a hard drive. This is real people getting killed. This is civilians, elderly, children getting killed. It is on all of us, including the Ukrainians, to come up with a way to stop it. I don't need to tell the Ukrainians that, but the point being is the really hard lift here is going to be from the diplomatic angle and trying to come up with a way that President Putin is either removed, or if he's not, that he could come up with a way to claim some sort of victory so we could stop the conflict itself.
So on that one, Mick, the chatter has been, since phase one failed, if you will, a kind of lightning war that was a quick 10-day Russian victory. Now that's faded, but it seems to be on the ladder for Putin to climb down. Top talking point has been agreement that Russia maintains some presence in Donbass. Of course, keeps the Crimea that they took over in 2014. Is this for real? Can this really happen?
So I know that's what they have been proposing, probably because they now realize they're not going to succeed. And as evidence of that, and I think it was one of our past discussions, Putin didn't declare any kind of victory on their victory day. He did not call up conscripts. That indicated to a lot of analysts that he actually realizes there's no way to win this thing. So now he's talking about keeping something they already had, right? So Crimea. It was illegally gained and it's not recognized as part of Russia. I just think that's going to be very difficult for President Zelensky to agree to. In fact, he's actually said he won't unless he has a vote by the Ukrainians that supports something like that. And I don't know, but I don't see the Ukrainian population, many of whom have been completely terrorized, many of whom have lost loved ones to this invasion, agreeing to cede any part of their country to Russia, especially since they know Russia's only asking for this because they're losing, right? So that's the very difficult part in bringing a conflict to an end. When any one side thinks they have an advantage, then they're not they're not likely to, it has to be to a point where both sides realize it's in their best interest because they can't advance either of their interests any further. And Russia is not in that situation, but Ukraine actually sees a path toward at least conventional military success.
And Mick, last question here in a quick minute. A lot of people are, I guess, happy to see Finland and Sweden consider application to NATO and in some ways proving Russia and President Putin wrong and what have you not. I wonder, Mick, if there's something more kind of below the headline of "we told you so," that there's something else that we might learn about that dynamic.
So it is a significant thing, right? So they went through the entirety of the Cold War without joining NATO. So they were essentially neutral the whole time. And now, because to your point, Putin was so concerned about NATO expansion, they invaded Ukraine, and now he's caused Finland and Sweden, which I think they will drop their application today if they have not already, to join, which is something that they haven't done in over 50 years. So it is significant. It is important to note that both Sweden and Finland are completely militarily compatible with NATO. They have the same weapon systems, same communications. They actually do a lot of joint training. It's called their joint expeditionary group that they are actually already belong to. So this is going to be very easy to assimilate. There's going to be, I read yesterday that Russia was moving Iskander missiles to the border. There's going to be a lot of saber rattling from Russia. And then we have the Turkey situation. But I think we can get past that, and it will be a significant gain for NATO if it does, in fact, that.
Well, you can't get it any better or any clearer than from Mick Mulroy from the Lobo Institute. Mick, thank you so much for lending your perspective, helping us understand what's going on behind the headlines on this, many people are calling the most significant geopolitical event in our generation. I don't think that that's exaggerating it, or maybe not hugely exaggerating it. So thank you for that, Mick. I'd also like to quickly thank the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Allegiance, and Stockman Bank, our very generous sponsors who help us bring this and so many more programs to you on international affairs. So Mick, until another week or two, we'll see if we're in a new phase or what's happening. Much appreciated. Thanks for joining us, and thanks everyone for viewing. Be well. Goodbye.